Welcome to the Best Little Town Podcast, your go-to source for everything happening in the town of Bedford's local government. Whether it's new initiatives or important decisions shaping our town's future, you'll hear it right here. This podcast is dedicated to keeping our residents informed and engaged.
Greetings, salutations, and good morning. Today is Wednesday, August 19th. It's 10:12 a.m. as we're recording. My name is Bart Warner. I have the privilege of serving as the town manager of Bedford and welcoming you to this episode of the Best Little Town Podcast, a cooperative effort with our partners at Media Squatch to provide engagement and information to our citizens, customers, businesses, and interested parties into the workings of your local government here with the town. Specifically, what we do is provide a recap of regular council meetings and work sessions as they occur. And as I join you on the 19th of August, that means that we had a meeting last night on August 18th, which began at 6 p.m., a little bit unusual, with a work session. That is something that we do occasionally to talk about topics in an open discussion with council and staff that have been issues for a while that maybe we've had questions about. Oftentimes staff seeks direction from council. Really, it's an effort to kind of vet some ideas in a public way that is more open than the committee structure. Just to inform people, town council does have several standing committees. Those are identified in the town code, and they have responsibility for certain functional areas. But as we grow and more things are occurring and happening, we have determined that it's probably better to engage all 7 council members when we can in discussions, and to make those as open and public as possible, to invite further information, and that's really the purpose of them, to talk things through that are important to the community or that come up from the council or from citizens, and to get ideas about how to pursue those without necessarily taking formal action. So last night we had a work session. We had 4 items of discussion that were put before council, and the first of those was an update on the status of the Bedford Middle School renovation project. For folks who are not familiar, just a little bit of recap. The large school complex in the middle of town at the intersection of Peaks and Longwood, and really Bridge Street, where it comes together, was the site of the public school in Bedford beginning back in the turn of the 20th century. It was Bedford High School. There was original yellow building that I think was open circa 1915 that served that purpose. A larger brick building was built next door in the 1930s, and that eventually evolved and became used as the Bedford Middle School. That was its last incarnation while it was operated by the school system. That ended in about 2017 when the new Liberty Middle School was constructed. That property was owned by the town of Bedford, and we initiated a process by which we solicited ideas for redevelopment. Town council at the time had some specific goals in mind. They put out an RFP and engaged in a pretty extensive performance agreement with Waukesha Development, headed by Dave McCormick, ultimately who was brought on to convert the brick building into market rate apartments and to convert the yellow building into a boutique hotel. The work on the project really began in earnest in 2020 after the unfortunate fire incident on the site. Those apartments, known as the Flora Apartments, were opened earlier this year and are active and occupied and producing homes for the people that choose to live there, and frankly, revenue for the community, and also allowing us to welcome newcomers as well as provide another housing option for existing citizens. The yellow building has been bogged down a little bit in some administrative issues, frankly, and that's one thing I reported to council. While the brick building is up and running, and we're, I think, glad to see that activity take place, the renovation of the old yellow building, as we affectionately refer to it, has been held up by a couple of things. One of the most significant relates to the building permit, inspection, and approval process. Mr. McCormick, in redeveloping that property for a hotel project, as this often happens when you get into any kind of renovation or improvement project, you have plans that you set in place, and then you run into issues that require some adjustments. And that happened with the old yellow building. For folks who may have been familiar with the interior of it, that building had an old, really neat gymnasium facility with large windows and open space. In getting into some of the plumbing and structural issues in that part of the building, Waukesha made some changes to what they were proposing to do that didn't affect the overall scope of the project, but were significant enough to where our building official thought that they certainly required documentation at that point in time. So that's been the source of the biggest holdup recently, the fact that the drawings that were submitted needed to be redrawn in that portion of the building to address some of those structural issues. Town building official, basically, we've worked closely with the developer and also managing the town's interests. But ultimately, it's one of those things where it was significant enough to where we needed to have the documentation moving forward. So if there are any issues years from now, we have that in our records and we can refer to it. I'm going to pause while the train passes by the studio here. So the building official's office again noted the need to update the drawings. That work had to be performed by qualified professionals, including architects and engineers, and that took quite a bit of time. In the meanwhile, Mr. McCormick, who was managing the property, didn't have much work for the people on site to do because we were trying to get the drawings and documentation. So those crews were sent to other projects. Some of those were projects that Mr. McCormick manages. Some of them involved subcontractors he was using that then went on to other projects that may or may not have had anything to do with him. So those documents were reviewed and approved about 3 months ago, but since then, Mr. McCormick is in the process of getting those workers back. And that was the discussion that we had last night. I acknowledged that process, and really in terms of the delay with Old Yellow, that it's can be attributable largely to a town issue and an administrative process that has since been resolved. But since that point, Mr. McCormick is trying to get those workers back and get that work done. Questions I think a lot of council members have been receiving and that many of you may have is, when will that take place? Unfortunately, Mr. McCormick was not available to join us last night. And so it became my responsibility to kind of serve as a communicator or go-between. I will say, and I'll report this to council in writing, that I called and spoke with Mr. McCormick just this morning and told him the largest concerns that we have are the certainty about when activity will resume. Mr. McCormick advised that he's pretty close to getting all the things worked out and getting people back on site after this stoppage of work and delay in construction. He does not have a specific time frame that he can share with us, but he says it'll be soon. And of course, one thing I told him was if he has specific dates when we will see activity, we would appreciate knowing that so we can share it with the community. And largely that the concern is that the work will progress. Quite a bit of discussion. We did record the work session, and that video is posted on YouTube. So, council had a good discussion of their concerns, worries that perhaps the project won't be done in a timely manner or done at all. And there was some kind of good factual information about process there. We did note that in terms of our relationship to the property, Mr. McCormick's LLC does actually own it now. So the performance agreement spoke to that has happened. He took over ownership of the property. Again, the apartment part has been complete. He's paying real estate taxes on that. And the hotel, once it is up and running, will be also paying transient occupancy tax from day one when that occurs. So again, there's also some leverage we had. Mr. McCormick has got several grants and funding through the state that we do have some input on. And I did report last night that There was an inquiry as to whether the project overall was substantially complete, and what we've said and let Mr. McCormick know as well is that we can't provide that input to the state based on this existing status of the old yellow building. So again, there is some leverage involved, but largely it seems to be a logistical issue at this point that Mr. McCormick is working to address. And as soon as he has some specific information to share with us, we will pass that along. The second item of discussion for last night's work session was an update on the municipal building HVAC repairs. Again, a little bit of background. Our municipal building was constructed in the late 1960s and has been continuously operating and occupied since then. What we're discovering symptomatically is there have been some significant issues with the electrical system of the building, which is a lot of the original wiring and guts, including some components provided by a company that went out of business in the 1970s. That is manifesting itself by some failures of the electrical system that tie directly to our heating and air conditioning systems. Most notably in the hot weather months, we've had failures of the air conditioning system. In addition to the matters of comfort and convenience for our employees and our customers that come in the building, we also have significant information technology equipment within the building in our server room. And as I noted that I don't really want to get into a discussion of the air conditioning issues with data centers, but we kind of had a micro issue of that of our own. All the computer equipment generates heat and it's in a confined space. So when we first started to note the air conditioner issues in the building, we went ahead and put in some redundant mini split systems to serve that room. Those are functioning and those are good, but the rest of the system is still the original water chilled system with, in many cases, original 1960s parts that staff and our partners at Select Air have been working for several years to nurse and to keep going. And frankly, given the level of investment that we've all put in that, we've recognized that it's probably time to do something different and fix the problem once and for all. And it's probably most cost effective to do that one time. To that point, we have engaged with Thompson and Litton after a request for proposals process in which they emerged. They are evaluating Town Hall right now. In fact, they're currently tracing the electric system. They're going to be making recommendations about the changes that need to occur and the renovations that need to take place, developing the construction documents for that, and bidding that out for us. Of course, one part of that is replacement of the air conditioning system, and we will be moving from a water chill system to an overall split system. That was the recommendation of Thompson Litton, and we kind of vetted that through council at a meeting just a month or so ago to kind of publicly let people know that's what we're going through. In the short term, we still have the same issues with our failing systems, including a water chiller that, again, was original to the building. That went out back in June, and we'd had experiences the year before where we just kind of had to tough things out. In response to that, Select Air identified a temporary solution, which was bringing in a portable rental chiller as one option. But the first plan was to repair the existing water chiller on a permanent basis with the idea that that could be done at a cost of $30,000, and that would carry us forward to the ultimate renovation of the building. We did pursue that $30,000 option. Unfortunately, we have learned that, and we learned this just yesterday, in fact, the parts for that original 1960s era chiller, although the chiller itself has been replaced since then, can't be made. The one company that was able to fabricate that went out of business back in 2020. So the idea of fixing the permanent chiller and having that see us through for about a year is no longer an option. Again, while we were doing that, we encountered some other delays with that option, which led us to secure a temporary chiller. It's on a trailer parked outside in our parking lot. If you drive by, that's what you see, taking up a couple of spaces. That is providing adequate air conditioning for the entire structure right now. But unfortunately, that's a temporary solution, and we are leasing that at a cost of $38,000 a month. We brought that to the attention of council last night, and given the fact that we can't pursue the $30,000 option of repair, we know that the temporary and portable chiller option works, but also $38,000 a month seems a little pricey if it's something we're going to have to continue for more than a few months. So our Public Works Director, Tom Woodard, is in the process of finding costs for us to obtain a temporary portable chiller that we would own and would therefore not have to pay a monthly fee. And if we can do that at a cost of $90,000 or less, we think that's a better, more practical, and more cost-effective solution. So we presented that information to council last night, and again, no actions taken. There were no. I think council technically could take action in work sessions, but we discourage that because we certainly prefer to do that in our regular meetings and when people are present, and we just think it's a more transparent approach. But council did authorize staff to move forward with exploring that option of obtaining a portable chiller at a cost of $90,000 or less. I did advise them that if the cost is more than that, we will let them know. But either way, formal approval of that and a budget amendment will be forthcoming at a future regular council meeting. So again, a lot of people wonder about how things arise on the new business agenda. This is one example of an operational issue that we've been dealing with for a while, and we've tried to communicate to the greatest extent possible. But if we can find this piece of equipment we need at that cost, that's going to be a new business item upcoming as soon, frankly, as we can get to it. I'm going to pause again for another train to pass by. And then jump back into the remaining items on the work session agenda last night. The third item of discussion was a discussion of changing South Street to two-way traffic between Main Street and Washington Street. Again, for folks who are familiar with our downtown area, there's an interesting configuration of our streets, mainly because it dates to our history as a town that was developed largely before automobiles. A lot of our streets and public right-of-ways were laid out well before automobiles were even a thought, when we were a horse-drawn town, and that's why you might see some things that raise questions and don't make a lot of sense, frankly, including streets that come together at intersections with other streets but don't align directly. South Street is one of those. South Street, again, is a connector from Main Street southward. It heads out of town from Main Street, but in the course from Main Street to Washington Street in that first block, it is one way heading southward. Also, that intersection with Main Street, it is very close to an intersection of Court Street with Main Street that is about 30 feet offset from South Street, so there's not a true intersection. Both of those are regulated by traffic lights, but that's part of the discussion as well. This was brought up for discussion by council last night, primarily because we get a lot of questions about why South Street is only one way in that particular block. And frankly, it's one of those things where we didn't have a lot of documentation. That's one thing we're trying to do now with having these work sessions and public meetings, is to make sure that we document these sorts of things, so in the future we kind of leave a trail for our successors to follow. So if it ever comes up later, we've got video, we've got minutes, and we've got other means of record keeping that we didn't have whenever this decision was made. Councilman Stacey Haley did share some of his findings. He looked into it and said that there was a citizen that was here back in the 1980s, and the explanation they provided was this kind of coincides with the advent of the former Main Street program that used to be active in town. There was a study engaged by the Virginia Department of Transportation of all city streets, and apparently one of the recommendations of that study was to convert Main Street and Washington Street to one-way traffic, heading in opposite directions. Mr. Haley noted that people might be aware of some examples of that in nearby places such as Lynchburg. Downtown Lynchburg, Main Street is one way, and then you return one block over in the other direction. I can tell you the town where I grew up in has a similar situation, and coincidentally, that's the course of business 460, just like Main Street here. So apparently back in the mid 80s or early 80s, there was a plan to make those changes to Main Street and Washington Street. To complement that proposed change, there were also some side streets that would be considered to be converted to one way to kind of feed that overall pattern. Apparently then South Street, this particular block, was identified as serving that purpose. And that's when that change was implemented, when it went from being two-way traffic to one-way headed southbound. At that point, the overall discussion about changing Main Street and Washington Street was discontinued and never pursued. However, the one-way pattern on South Street remained. So again, Mr. Haley offered that explanation. We appreciate him doing that research. If anybody has a better explanation, we're happy to hear it and share that with everybody. But for now, we're going to put a pin in that and make reference to it. Having discussed that and decided that we're comfortable with that explanation, council then entered into a discussion of whether or not they wanted to go back to the old pattern of two-way traffic. After considerable discussion of that, council did reach a consensus to have staff look into that. Again, no action is taken yet. And also, this is going to be a more complicated process than people might want to expect. In response to that, I can tell you I've reached out to all our department heads to initiate the process of evaluating changing South Street back to two-way traffic. We're going to need to have a massive public engagement process, particularly with the property owners along that corridor and in the immediate area. We're also going to obviously need a great deal of citizen input overall. We're going to be evaluating things like pavement widths and impacts on turns on Main Street and possibly Court Street. A lot of really technical and kind of soft skill details that need to be worked out in order to then bring back a proposal for further consideration by council. So again, as I spoke to the last issue on the work session agenda, it's a discussion right now. We're trying to get all the details we can about how it might work. We want some input on that as we go. For that to be moved forward or any action to be taken, we're going to do that at a public meeting and probably have a public hearing at that process as well. One of the observations of government activity is it doesn't happen quickly, but that's because it's a lot more complicated, and we have to make sure that we get as much input and balance the interests of several parties with vested interests as we possibly can. On a side note, another discussion related to existing signage and turn regulation on Main Street. We currently have a sign that prohibits left turns from East Main Street onto South Bridge Street. There's just one sign that is the arrow lift with a red circle and a slash through it. There was discussion that a lot of people don't seem to see that sign and they turn left anyway. And so one of the things we're looking into is whether we can remove that sign and allow officially left-hand turns from East Main onto South Bridge Street. Vice Mayor Darrell Updike spoke to that issue. He said his understanding, based on being a native of Bedford and also working several years for the Bedford Police Department, was there were some congestion issues created by motorists who were attempting to execute that turn back in the days when Main Street was still a main component of the 460 route system. And there was still a lot of traffic through downtown, passing through downtown. But Darrell noted that one of the benefits the community saw with the construction of Independence Boulevard, which occurred in the 1990s, was that seemed to take some of the stress off that particular intersection. So something else we're looking at is whether or not we can allow that left turn officially from East Main Street onto South Bridge Street. And this is the process by which these discussions happen, and council provides the directions to staff. The last item that was discussed as part of the work session was an update of the transfer station that the town owns and operates on Orange Street, and some of the issues, both operational and budget-wise, related to that. Again, for people who may not be familiar, the town currently owns a transfer station at Orange Street, whereby folks who choose to do so can haul their garbage directly to that facility and dispose of it there. But the primary purpose of that is disposal of commercial solid waste. And again, this goes back to a budget discussion we had and implemented last year, in which the town got out of the commercial solid waste business because we found that it was not cost effective and was creating a burden and also an obstacle to our attempted replacement of some revenue that goes away in 2028. We determined that the curbside commercial solid waste collection was something that we could not provide on a competitive basis, so we discontinued that. I mentioned that the transfer station relates to that. There was a question that arose about residential trash service. This is a good time to explain the fact that residential trash collection and commercial trash disposal are two separate issues for the town of Bedford. And that relates to the reversion agreement with Bedford County, whereby the county agreed that the town could dispose of all of its residential refuse at the county's landfill facilities at no cost. So for residential service, we find that we are able to provide that at a very competitive rate. In fact, in some of our discussions with trash haulers, we're able to do so at a much lower cost than they think they could do it. So that's why the separation there. Of course, you have to participate in that service. It's not mandatory. It is voluntary. If you're interested in the curbside residential services, please contact us at 540-587-6001, and we will get you signed up. But again, for those folks who do not take advantage of that, they still have access to a transfer station, and then also it's utilized for commercial trash disposal. We have had a long-standing agreement with a hauler, Bay's Trash Removal, to provide that service to you. But since the point that we are not in the curbside collection business, we have found that we likewise really don't have as much need for a commercial disposal facility. That operation is still funded primarily by town tax dollars. So what that means is if you pay town taxes, you're paying for a transfer station, whether you use it or not. Going back to what we said about the county's landfill facilities, in addition to our internal ability to dispose of trash at no cost, all of us as county taxpayers are paying for county's solid waste disposal facilities. That includes the main landfill facility off Route 43, but also a series of convenience centers that we as town residents certainly, but as county residents can take advantage of by virtue of our status as county residents and taxpayers. During the annexation and all through the reversion process, one of the discussions we've had is about the notion of double taxes and duplication of services. Last night, one of the things we talked about was this situation I just described seems to fit that category. If you're a town taxpayer, again, you're paying for the upkeep of a facility that we're not really required to have, but as long as we have it, we are required to maintain it in compliance with state regulations, particularly those of the Department of Environmental Quality. That's all background. What I just mentioned is part of the discussion last night. As long as the town continues to operate this transfer station, which again, the usefulness of it for our operation is questionable at best, we are subject to annual inspections by DEQ. Most recently, they cited two issues with our operation. The first being the fact that our scales entering the transfer station facility need to be updated and replaced. The cost of that is somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000. There's also an issue at the facility itself with the floor there's some structural issues that need to be addressed. Likewise, the capital cost for that ranges from $100,000 to $200,000. So in addition to the operating cost for the station and how that relates to our overall functions within our structure, there's almost $400,000 of capital improvements that are going to be required that, frankly, we think are going to be a challenge for us to meet in terms of budget. Financially, we are in fairly decent shape. We do have some resources marshaled that we haven't had before. And our plan to address the loss of the $750,000 seems to be on track. But unexpected things like that cost kind of derail that and create some stress. And the discussion centers on whether or not that's something we could continue to bear. All that was background for some action that council has taken in their regular meetings to solicit interest from companies who might be willing to take that over for us. We issued a request for information followed by an RFP for a franchise. The effort there was to see if there was any operator who might be willing to either purchase that facility from us or to lease it from us and continue to operate it. Otherwise, the discussion would quickly turn to us closing it altogether, which also would still have some cost obligations. In response to that, we did receive one qualified response from Bay's Trash Removal, who said they are interested in working out some arrangement whereby they would either obtain a franchise to operate the facility or lease it from us. And we mentioned that during the work session. That's the option that we were pursuing, and I'll get to it in just a minute. In the regular session, which followed, beginning at 7 p.m., there was a closed session. The closed session was for the purpose of talking directly with Bays about negotiating the details of that interest. Again, I'll come back to that and speak a little bit about the nature of that discussion as much as I can, but also why that occurred in closed session. Council spent about 45 to 50 minutes talking about all these matters last night, gave staff some good direction. There are probably some things that are going to be coming back for formal review and formal votes by council. I also noted that we intend to schedule some future work sessions dealing with some items such as downtown parking standards and accommodation of the residents who are there overnight and potential conflicts between that and business use. Also mentioned that we have engaged with conservation partners to see what we can do with some of our vacant properties that probably are either not going to be developed or developed in a very low intensity manner. They're on the ground. I will say publicly, they're looking at the property we own up around the reservoir. They think that we may be eligible for some grants related to possible conservation activity on that property, which would have the benefits of providing some revenue to the town, but also protecting the property and the adjacent water supply at Stony Creek Reservoir. There are also some other properties that the town owns that are vacant that council has considered as possible surplus or possible conservation uses. And the town attorney has done some research on all of those, and that discussion is going to be a topic for a future work session that we intend to bring forward once we have more information. So wanted to provide that background, and that's what we closed with last night. Work session was adjourned at approximately 6:50 p.m., maybe 6:55 p.m., and had just a few minutes before we then had Mayor Stanley pound the gavel and open the regular council meeting, which was posted. The agenda was posted for that last week, which occurred beginning at 7 p.m. First item of business was approval of the minutes from the previous meeting, which would have been August 4th. That was unanimously accepted by acclaim of council. Next was a report of the town manager. Last night, I reminded everyone that the Bedford County Fair will be taking place at Liberty Lake Park again this year. That begins at 5 o'clock p.m. on Friday, August 21st, and runs through 6 p.m. on Sunday, August 23rd. This is the second year that we have hosted this event. Bedford County Fair is a nonprofit organization with basically a standalone board. It's something that we had to kind of get our heads around as well. It's an affair targeted toward residents of the county and interested parties, but it is not technically a function of the Bedford County government. So just in case there are questions about that, we wanted to be clear about that. I also noted that public schools opened today, August 19th. So what that means for us is we have Bedford Primary School and Bedford Elementary School within our town boundaries. And of course, Liberty Middle School and Liberty High School just outside on Route 122. And particularly as the school day starts and the school day ends and students and teachers return home, probably going to see some impacts on traffic related to that. And just ask people to be aware and cautious of that factor. Next item, business, was appearances before council. First person to appear was Mr. Seth Reddy, who offered a prayer on behalf of the community and council and the operation in particular. In his preliminary comments, Mr. Reddy cited Psalm 127 as a reference point, and he concluded that activity as part of the appearances before council. The next speaker was Mr. Danny Kirby, who is a resident of Watson Place. He thanked council for tabling action on changes in pavement marking on Longwood Avenue at their last meeting, shared his observation that the changes would basically create an entirely new traffic pattern, and the issues with immediate familiarity with that ought to be addressed before taking any actions, but he thought it was the right idea to allow further comment and consideration. He also shared his view that there should have been more public comment when there were previous actions taken to lower the speed limit on Longwood Avenue, which are kind of related to that discussion of changing the pavement marking. The next speaker was Leslie Mahaffey of Woodland Road, who likewise spoke in opposition to the item of old business related to changing the pavement marking on Longwood Avenue. She shared her view that it involved an expense that was probably not necessary, and shared concerns about the impact on ambulance traffic going to and from Bedford Memorial Hospital. Shared her view that people are familiar with the current configuration, and that based on that, it's an easier concept, kind of following up on the point made, I think, by Mr. Danny Kirby separately. There were comparisons drawn to a similar situation on Burks Hill Road, south of 460, and again, the proposed line striping change developed by Hearn Profit does closely mirror that. That was something that was done a few years back. People still have some concerns and opinions about that. Ms. Mahaffey noted that since that's also a state route, 122, this is 221, she then wondered if this might then be a topic that pops up on Blue Ridge Avenue, which is on the west end of town, and East Main Street, which are Route 460 and local streets that in those particular sections are also currently 4-lane roads. She asked that council not pursue further action on the matter until they consider those other streets as well, and then noted that in the case of Longwood and these other streets, there is a mixture of uses, and this would have an impact, therefore, on several different motorists. She also offered the suggestion that increased police enforcement would be sufficient to address any speeding concerns. Ms. Mahaffey was the last person to sign up, and with that, the appearances before council portion was completed. We then moved on to council comments. Councilman Jay Ippolito began by thanking all who were present. We again had a pretty robust turnout in person for the meeting, which we always appreciate. Jay Ippolito noted that he appreciated the comments of all the speakers who appeared, and also encouraged people to be aware of the Bedford County Fair at Liberty Lake Park, and thanked I think our town staff who are working with them to assist them, and asked folks to be aware, and those who are interested to turn out and enjoy the event. Next, Councilman Todd Foreman likewise thanked everyone who was present. He also expressed his appreciation to the people who are running for council in the upcoming election. We do have an election where there are 3 council seats that are available. Those are currently occupied by Stacey Haley, C.G. Stanley, and Darrell Updike. There are 4 candidates running. None of those 4 are Darrell Updike or C.G. Stanley. So there will be some change on council, and just want to make people aware of that. But Todd Foreman last night expressed his appreciation of the folks who are willing to put themselves out there and to serve in this role, and noted his observation that it's not an easy job, that oftentimes the council has to take actions that may not be immediately popular and may not be perfectly clear to folks. He cited that he makes use of his spiritual beliefs and his personal faith to guide him, specifically noting a passage of Scripture, Micah chapter 6, verse 8, in that regard, and noted that all council members do recognize that they need to approach this from a standpoint of humility. Next person to speak was Councilman Stacey Haley, who thanked all those who were physically in attendance. Next, Vice Mayor Updike, likewise, thanked everyone who made a point to come out physically for the meeting and also expressed his appreciation for the input provided by citizens. Councilman Dwight Evans was next to speak. He thanked everyone who was present and also those who were watching online. This is a good time to mention that we meet on the first and third Tuesdays, regular meetings at 7 p.m., unless there's some issues such as a lack of new business or sometimes holiday conflicts affect that schedule as well. Love to have people join us at 215 East Main Street upstairs in the municipal building. But if you can't, we do live stream those meetings in cooperation with Media Squatch. We also post the videos on YouTube. If you just search for Town of Bedford, Virginia, you'll find them there. And once the minutes are approved, those are posted on our website at www.bedfordva.gov. Keep in mind that we only post the minutes that are approved. In case there are corrections that come to light at the next meeting, we don't want to put information out there that might not be entirely accurate. Again, getting back to Councilman Evans last night, he also shared his view of the difficult nature of serving on council and that decision-making requires humility and also consideration of safety issues that apply more broadly to the community and to all citizens, in addition to those who might specifically express their observations or concerns. Next to speak was Councilman David Foster, who shared his appreciation of the folks who showed up to speak and also his observations of serving on council and the need for humility and consideration of input. Finally, Mayor C.G. Stanley spoke. He said he appreciated people making comments, shared his view that council always try to do what they think is best for the community. He noted the presence of campaign signs throughout the town and shared his appreciation also for the 4 people who have stepped forth to serve on town council and the people who are willing to run for office in general. Next item of the agenda was the consent agenda, and that was composed of a request to close streets for National Night Out submitted by the Bedford Police Department. National Night Out is a national event that was, I think, created by a nonprofit to promote greater interaction between citizens and their police departments. Chief Moore, who's been here a couple of years now, noted that the original intent of that event was to publish a date and encourage people to have neighborhood gatherings that officers could stop by and visit and engage with the public. Tried that approach this summer, but noted that it didn't work out too well. So in response, he offered to schedule an event centered on the farmers market for October 6th to make sure that we do provide opportunities for engagement in a way that people are familiar with and are used to. So that's the background behind the request. Last night, the police department requested to close Washington Street for festivities at the intersection of Center Street and the intersection of South Bridge Street on October 6, 2026 from 5 p.m. until 8 p.m. That request was unanimously approved by all members of council. So on October 6th, which is also a council meeting night, by the way, police department will be hosting a National Night Out event similar to what we've done previously related to that particular objective. Next item on the agenda was a matter of old business, and that relates to a proposal to alter the pavement marking on Longwood Avenue. That was presented at the last meeting. Essentially, what was before council was a proposal to address the width of Longwood Avenue. A certain section of it is about 45 feet wide, and the issue there was council, in its affirmation of the desire to enforce a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit there, was looking for ways to assist, for lack of a better term, motorists in meeting that objective. We noted noted there's a correlation between wider streets and higher speeds. So Hurt and Profit, who have been engaged by the town to provide engineering services on a retainer basis, came up with a proposal to basically remark the pavement on Longwood Avenue, where it is currently 4 lanes and in a stretch from Oakwood westward until it narrows back down to 2. The proposal is to get rid of the 4 lanes and reduce that to 3 lanes. There would be 1 lane traveling in each direction. In the middle would be a left turn only lane. And then also, because the street was so wide, basically, Hurt and Profit also included the addition of bike lanes because there was literally enough space to do that. So that was what was presented to council and what they discussed at the last meeting and what they tabled. They tabled that until this meeting. So the first administrative question was whether or not they could go ahead and discuss it and take action, or if they had to take it from the table. Since the motion to table previously was specific, they were good to go ahead and do whatever it was they wished to do last night. So there's a little insight into Robert's rules or the administrative procedures that might interest some of you. Quite a bit of discussion about this by just about everybody on the dais. Councilman Dave Foster shared a lot of his personal insights and his concerns about the safety being the primary issue there, and the high volume of traffic in this section of Longwood, which passes through a residential area. He cited several other references and several studies, both conducted by the town and by regional authorities such as the Central Virginia Planning District, and also Virginia DOT, and also some federal guidelines that, suggest that higher speeds occur when there are wider streets. And given the fact that this particular stretch is part of the walking loop, we go off on a tangent there. We do have a series of sidewalks that comprise almost a 3-mile track through town that runs along Longwood Avenue, Oakwood Street, Whitfield Drive, and Peak Street. It's kind of a functioning recreation facility. A lot of people come and park and walk the loop. In addition to serving as part of our transportation system, it's also a recreational system. In reference to that was part of Mr. Foster's concerns and about the possible impact of high-speed traffic on the pedestrians on the adjacent sidewalk. Ultimately, he said he'd been approached by 8 residents from the Longwood Avenue area who had indicated to him that they were in favor of making the change. Next to speak was Councilman Stacey Haley. Mr. Haley provided a history of the process and prior discussions by council, and noted that he had gone back and reviewed the minutes of several previous council meetings, and there are several references to this issue specifically dating back to 2019. He also noted that in addition to what was before council last night, there have been several alternatives discussed, one of which was putting some kind of planted median along Longwood Avenue, similar to what has been done in other areas. One example that Mayor Stanley cited later in his discussion was 460 Orange Avenue in the city of Roanoke, just below Gus Nix Boulevard, where there's a planted median there. And again, Mr. Haley noted that these are things that the town has been discussing publicly for a long time. In addition to studies and references in the comprehensive plan, there have been public discussions previously at council meetings and work sessions, as well as various council committee meetings. He also noted that since we had Hurt and Profit available, we did engage them to evaluate this situation, largely related to the constant discussion of these other alternatives and to see what might be done. He also noted that council had made previous changes to the speed limit on Oakwood and Longwood previously, and noted that his view, the town's trying to find the right standard for speed limits within town. He noted that enforcement by the police department is something that could certainly be improved, but shared his view that the police department does a good job overall with its workload and other responsibilities. Next to speak was Vice Mayor Updike. He said that the last time the speed limit issue came up, he was actually the only one who opposed reducing the speed from 35 miles an hour to 25 miles an hour. Also offered the comparison between this proposal and the change in the striping on Burks Hill Road. He noted that he is a frequent user of that road and has found that change to be somewhat difficult in his own experience. Based on that, he is not in favor of changing the configuration to 3 lanes. He said he appreciates the addressing concerns about safety, but also said that perhaps an increase in law enforcement will be the best approach to that, and shared his view that at full staffing, the police department should be able to adequately address the speeding issue. Councilman Dwight Evans shared his favorable view of bike lanes and the presence of a lot of e-bikes on the sidewalks, particularly in the Loop area, and shared his favorable view of the proposal based on that issue as well as the possible benefits of traffic calming. Councilman Jay Ippolito shared his view that he didn't think Longwood was the best place to initiate installation of bike paths due to the lack of continuity. Essentially, this would be adding bike lanes in the middle of a corridor where they don't exist otherwise. Councilman Haley then spoke to the fact that there is a need for expanded intermodal options for transportation. That includes sidewalks, maybe even bikeways and multimodal paths, and that's also something that council has discussed previously before. Next was Todd Foreman, who shared his observation about bike laws and bike lanes, and his view as a cyclist that the presence of bike lanes do make cyclists feel safer while they're riding, but where the bike lanes do not exist, cyclists should know that they are then supposed to ride on the right side of the road. So the continuity issue he felt was valid, but could be addressed by the practices of cyclists as they ride. Shared his view that speeding on the Loop has been an issue and that traffic calming is desirable, and that the safety concerns are particularly important to him, particularly as they relate to pedestrians. Last to speak was Mayor C.G. Stanley, who also, to our benefit, provided a little bit of history as to how this 4-lane situation came to be in Longwood. He said at church one Sunday, he spoke with a retired VDOT engineer who said it actually dated back to the late 1950s when the route that is currently Longwood Avenue was the primary transit route through town, which kind of followed the same purpose and route as Highway 460 does now. Back in the 1950s, there was a plan to widen that road because it was the main road all the way through the town of Bedford, beginning at the point just above Westview Drive on Longwood Avenue eastward. Again, the idea was to widen it all the way through town and then subsequently through Bedford County and all the way into Lynchburg. Similar to the discussion on South Street during the work session, the rest of that work didn't take place and the 4-lane configuration remained. So that CG shared his appreciation of the gentleman who shared that historical view for the good of the public. And again, we appreciate that because, again, as part of our history, we need to make sure that we keep track of it and can point back to it. CG shared his view that we do need to do something in this particular corridor given the width of the pavement, and also cited the example I mentioned on Orange Avenue, which is 460 in the city of Roanoke, where they did a planted median and suggested that, after this restriping, we could have another discussion of that concept as well. In order to resolve the issue, the mayor entertained a motion. Councilman Dave Foster made a motion to accept the recommendations of Hurt and Profit to restripe the lanes on Longwood Avenue in this particular sector from 4 down to 2, as I described, 1 lane in each direction with a left turn lane in the middle and 2 bike lanes. That was seconded by Councilman Todd Foreman. Ultimately, on a roll call vote, that motion was passed 5-2, with Councilman Jay Ippolito and Vice Mayor Updike voting against it, Councilman Dwight Evans, Councilman Todd Foreman, Councilman Dave Foster, Councilman Stacey Haley, and Mayor Stanley voting for it. That concluded the old business. The only new business last night was a closed session for discussion of the award of a public contract where discussion would adversely affect the bargaining position of the public body. As I mentioned previously, there was a work session where we discussed a proposal by Bay's Trash Removal to engage in either a lease or franchise with the town to operate the transfer station and take over the financial liabilities associated with it. We went into closed session with Basil Bays and Brad Bays, along with Tom Woodard, our Public Works Director, where they presented the specifics of what they would like to propose to the town. And again, the reason that's in closed session is there are some proprietary things that they shared with town that would affect their public bargaining position as they try to compete within the business. And as I've said before, the town's trying to strike the best bargain we can on behalf of the citizens. So as much as we like to do things in a transparent public fashion, those kinds of considerations and negotiations sometimes simply can't be handled that way. I will say that there will be further action on this. We did talk about a possible lease or franchise agreement with Bay's Trash Removal for operation of our transfer station. Once our town attorney can work out the appropriate document and procedure for that, that will be advertised. There will be a public hearing, and there will be a public vote at a regular meeting in the open on any contract that's forthcoming. Once that closed session concluded, council came back into open session and adjourned. And there being no further business, we all went home. Our next regular meeting of council is scheduled for Tuesday, September 1st. Again, we meet on the first and third Tuesdays of each month. The way the calendar falls, the 1st is kind of an odd time for us. So I know we had to make some changes in our recurring notices on our schedules for staff to make sure we hit the department head meeting before that appropriately, but would invite all to either come by in person on September 1st at 7 p.m. and join us, or join us online. Or if you can't join us, feel free to catch the video on YouTube. Tune into this podcast for the details that it provides. And as always, if you have any questions or concerns, please contact us directly. Town Hall's located at 215 East Main Street. We're open from 8:30 to 5, Monday through Friday. Our main telephone number is 540-587-6001. Again, my name is Bart Warner. You can email me directly at bwarner@bedfordva.gov. Almost gave you the website instead. And with that concluded, I thank you very much for your attention to this episode of the podcast. Change is coming along with the seasons, also with our demographics and with our businesses. And we hope that is a pleasant and positive experience for most people. And we wish you good health and good cheer until we join you again.